didn't cry when my brother sent that text. I didn't throw my phone across the room. I didn't even text back. I just sat there on my couch in my apartment in Austin with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand, reading those words over and over until they stopped feeling like words and started feeling like something else, like confirmation of something I'd known for a long time but kept choosing not to see. We've decided to keep the wedding small, immediate family only. You understand? Immediate family. I'm his sister. I have been his sister for 31 years. I set my phone face down on the cushion beside me. I looked out the window at the street below. A woman was walking a golden retriever. A kid was riding a bike with training wheels still on. Normal Saturday morning. Nothing on fire. And yet, I want to be clear about something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not someone who asks for much. I grew up learning that asking for things was a liability. When you ask, you give people the chance to say no, and in my family, the no always came with a reason that made you feel smaller than you did before you asked. So I stopped asking young. I started doing. I started building, quietly, on my own. The way you build something when you know nobody's going to hand it to you. My brother's name is Colton. He is 34 years old, and he has always been the one my parents pointed to when they wanted to explain what success looked like. He went to the right school. He got the right job. He married. Well, he was about to marry a woman named Brooke, whose family owns 3 car dealerships in the greater Nashville area and who has opinions about floral arrangements that I genuinely cannot explain to you because I do not understand them myself. I am not like Colton. I never was. I was the one who dropped out of the business program at UT after 1 semester because I couldn't stop building things on my laptop during lecture. I was the one who moved to Austin at 22 with $4,000 saved from waitressing an idea for a software tool that I genuinely believed could change the way small logistics companies manage their routing. My parents thought I was having some kind of extended phase. My mom told her friends I was figuring things out. My dad, every Thanksgiving, would ask me when I was going to get a real job, and when I told him I was running my own company, he would nod in this slow, patient way that made it very clear he did not believe me. For 3 years, I worked out of my apartment. I ate a lot of pasta. I had exactly 2 full-time employees, both of whom were also eating a lot of pasta. We got a small seed round, then a bigger one, then a client who was mid-sized, then a client who was large, then a client who was very large and who told their peers about us. 2 months before my brother sent that text, I finalized the acquisition. A logistics tech firm out of Atlanta bought my company for $11 million. After taxes, after the equity split with my co-founders, after everything, I walked away with just under $4 million. I didn't announce it. I hadn't told my family. I'd been meaning to. I'd rehearsed versions of the conversation in my head. But every time I imagined telling them, I imagined my dad's slow nod, my mom pivoting immediately to ask if I was going to do something sensible now, Colton half listening while checking his phone. I kept putting it off. The money sat in accounts they didn't know about, attached to a life they had no window into. So when Colton sent that text, immediate family only, he genuinely did not know. He thought he was excluding the family disappointment, the one who dropped out, the one who was figuring things out. He had no idea who he was actually talking to. I did not respond to that text for 4 days. Not because I was composing some elaborate reply. I just didn't have anything to say yet. I needed to let the shape of it settle. I needed to understand what I was actually feeling because at first it was all mixed together. The hurt and the fury and this strange, clarifying calm underneath both of them. The hurt was real. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. Whatever Colton has become, whatever my family's dynamic has twisted into over the years, there is still a version of him in my memory who taught me to ride a bike in the driveway on a Tuesday afternoon when he didn't have to. There is still a version of us that existed before the comparisons started, before every family dinner became a quiet referendum on who turned out right. That version is gone, but you still grieve it. The fury was also real, because immediate family only was not the truth, and we both knew it. His college roommate was in the wedding party. Brooke's cousin, who none of us had met until 2 years ago, was seated at the head table. This was not about keeping things small. This was a choice, a deliberate one. And then underneath all of it, that calm, that still, flat voice that had been running underneath my life for the last decade, the one that sounds like math, the one that said, "You don't need this. You never did. And now you can prove it." I opened my laptop and I started making calls. My best friend Tessa has known me since we were 19 and sharing a dorm room at UT, and she is one of the few people in my life who knew about the acquisition. She answered on the second ring. "I saw the message," she said. She'd been on a group text where my mom had mentioned the wedding was going to be intimate. "Are you okay?" "I'm planning something," I said. "I need your help." There was a pause. Then, "Oh, this is going to be good." The idea had come to me in pieces. There were people on my side of the family, my aunt on my dad's side, her daughter, my cousin Mallory, a few others, who had been excluded from Colton's wedding for reasons that had nothing to do with intimacy and everything to do with Brooke's family quietly reshaping the guest list to reflect a certain image. My aunt had been told there was a capacity issue. Mallory found out she'd been cut when she asked but the +1 she'd been promised. My dad's mother, my grandmother, who I call Grandma Ray, had been given a seat at the ceremony but was not invited to the reception. She is 78 years old and she has never once in my entire life asked for anything she didn't deserve. She was told the reception was very limited. She accepted this without complaint because she is that kind of woman. I am less that kind of woman. I also thought about my two oldest friends from Austin, Priya and Cole, who had been through every hard year of building the company with me. Not as employees, but as the people who showed up with food when I was working through the night, who talked me off ledges, who celebrated the small wins when nobody else understood why they were wins. They weren't family, but they were the people who had actually shown up. I started making a list, 14 people, some of them within driving distance, some of them not. Then I opened a browser and started looking at properties. I had been to Kiawah Island once, years ago, on a work trip that ended with a team dinner at a place where the bread service alone cost more than my weekly grocery budget at the time. I remembered standing on the beach in the dark afterward and thinking that this was the kind of place that existed for people who had made it, and that I was going to make it, and that someday I was going to come back. I found a private estate rental on the island. 8 bedrooms, a private pool, direct beach access, a chef's kitchen with a catering-grade setup. The weekend of Colton's wedding. Available. The cost was significant. I didn't care. I booked it. Then I called my grandmother. Grandma Ray cried. Not a lot, and not in a way that felt like pity. She's not built for pity. She cried the way she does sometimes when something catches her off guard, when she's moved by something she wasn't expecting to be moved by. I told her where we were going, and I heard her take a breath. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," I said. "That must have cost." "It's fine," I said. "It's really fine." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You turned out all right, baby." I booked the flights. I arranged cars. I handled every detail because I had the time and the resources, and because, honestly, it felt good to have a plan after 4 days of sitting with something that had no shape. This had a shape. This was concrete. I knew what I was doing and I knew why. I did not tell anyone what it cost. I did not send a group text announcing the gesture. I just told each person, "We're going to Kiawah that weekend. It's covered. Bring whatever you need. Show up." The only other thing I did was post on my personal Instagram, which is private and which Colton follows because we are still technically following each other, a single photo. It was a photo I'd had on my phone for a year, taken the day the acquisition closed. I'm standing outside the office, squinting a little in the afternoon sun, holding a bottle of champagne and grinning like an idiot. I hadn't posted it at the time because I wasn't ready. The caption was simple. Better late than never. 4 years of work. Grateful for every person who showed up. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't mention the acquisition explicitly. But the bottle was from a place Priya and Cole had gifted me specifically for that day, and the office sign was visible in the background, and anyone who knew anything about the logistics tech space in Austin would have understood. I hit post. I turned off notifications. I went to bed. We flew out on a Friday morning. 14 people, different flights, converging on an island off the coast of South Carolina in June, when the air is thick and warm and the light does something specific to the water in the late afternoon that I don't have adequate words for. The house was more than the photos. It always is, when you're there in person and you can feel the scale of a place. Grandma Ray walked in through the front door and stood in the entryway and just looked around for a long moment without saying anything. Tessa grabbed my arm. Mallory immediately found the back deck and started taking photos. Priya went straight to the kitchen and announced that she was making breakfast for everyone the next morning. No arguments. That first night we sat outside on the deck long after dinner was finished, with wine and the sound of the ocean, and the particular ease that happens when a group of people who genuinely like each other have nowhere to be. My aunt told a story about my grandmother I'd never heard. Mallory talked about her job, which she loves. Cole fell asleep in a chair with his arms crossed, and nobody woke him up. I thought about what Colton was doing that weekend. I thought about it briefly, and then I let it go, because honestly it didn't matter and the night was too good to waste on it. I did not check my phone. I checked my phone on Saturday afternoon. I had 17 missed calls. I had 43 text messages across 4 different threads. I had 3 voicemails. I sat down on the edge of the pool deck and read through the messages in order. The first ones were from my mother and were, initially, fairly controlled. She had seen the Instagram post. She had questions. The questions escalated. By the third message, she had arrived at the conclusion that I had deliberately timed the post to humiliate the family on Colton's wedding weekend, which, yes, obviously, but the directness of the accusation surprised me a little. My dad's messages were shorter. My dad texts the way he talks, in short, declarative statements with no punctuation. We need to talk. This is not okay. Call me when you have a moment. The absence of punctuation makes everything he writes feel like it's being said through clenched teeth, which is accurate. Colton's messages were the longest and they went through several distinct phases. The first phase was confusion. He'd seen the post and hadn't understood it. The second phase was, I think, him Googling or talking to someone who knew something about the Austin logistics tech space, because the third phase was different. The third phase was a kind of stunned recalibration that I could feel even through text. You sold your company? You sold it for how much? Why didn't you tell any of us? And then, after a gap of about 40 minutes, I think we need to talk about things. About the wedding, about the invitation situation. Brooke and I had some conversations about the guest list, and I'm not sure everything was communicated the way it should have been. I read that one twice. I'm not sure everything was communicated the way it should have been. He had not called to tell me I was excluded from his wedding. He had sent a text that said, immediate family only. That communication was extremely clear. What had changed was not the communication. What had changed was his understanding of who he had communicated it to. I put my phone down on the pool deck beside me and looked out at the ocean for a while. Grandma Ray came out from inside with 2 glasses of sweet tea and sat down next to me without saying anything, the way she does when she's figured out something is happening and has decided to simply be present for it instead of asking. She handed me one of the glasses. I took it. Drama? She said after a minute. Some, I said. She nodded. We sat there together and drank our tea and watched the water. I called my mother back that evening. I waited until after dinner, after Tessa and Mallory had taken Grandma Ray down to the beach to walk while there was still light. After the house had gone quiet and I had a moment alone on the back deck with a glass of wine and enough composure to have a conversation without it becoming something else. My mother answered immediately. Where are you? She said. Not hello. I'm at a property I rented on Kiawah Island, I said, for the weekend, with Grandma Ray and Mallory and some friends. There was a pause. How much did that cost? It's fine, I said. That's not an answer. No, I said, but it's what I've got for you on that. She took a breath. I could hear her composing herself. That specific sequence I've known since childhood, where she shifts from reactive to managed. Your brother is getting married today? You know that. And that post? I know he's getting married today, I said. I was invited to the ceremony. I was not invited to the reception. I was categorized as not immediate family, which, I want to note, is a thing he put in a text. He said there were space constraints. Mom, I said it quietly, not sharply, just clearly. I know that's not true, and you know that's not true, and you know that's not true, and I think we're both tired enough to not do that tonight. She was quiet for a moment. When did you sell your company? She said. Her voice had shifted. The managed tone was gone and something more genuine was underneath it. 2 months ago. 2 months. Another pause. Why didn't you tell us? And here's the honest answer, the one I have been sitting with for the past year, the one I had rehearsed and discarded a dozen versions of, because I didn't think he'd believe me, because every time I tried to talk about what I was building, I felt the weight of the slow nod, the patient waiting for me to come back to something real, because I built something significant and I was, on some level, afraid to hand it to you before it was completely undeniable. Because I knew what it would feel like if you still managed to make it feel like not enough. I didn't say all of that. I said I needed it to be finished before I shared it. She didn't respond to that. Then, Colton wants to talk to you. I know, I said. I saw his messages. Will you call him? Not tonight, I said. Tonight I'm on Kiawah Island with Grandma Ray and some people who have been showing up for me for years, and I'm going to finish my wine and enjoy the sunset. I'll talk to Colton when I'm ready. She made a sound that wasn't quite agreement and wasn't quite protest. It was the sound of someone recalibrating. That property sounds expensive, she said finally. A different kind of comment than the first time she'd said it, more like acknowledgement than accusation. It's a nice house, I said. We said goodnight and I hung up and sat there until the sky went dark and the stars came out over the water, which on Kiawah, away from most of the light, are actual stars. Not the dim suggestion of stars you get in the city. The real thing. Colton and I spoke the following Tuesday, after I was back in Austin and had slept in my own bed and felt ready to have a conversation without an ocean view as emotional reinforcement. He called. I answered. He led with the word look, which is something he's always done when he's backed into a corner and is trying to control the entrance point of a conversation. Look, I know this is complicated. Look, I want to be fair here. When he says, look, he means, I have already decided how this conversation is going to go and I am hoping you will follow my lead. I let him talk for a few minutes. He said things about the guest list being Brooke's domain. He said things about the guest list being Brooke's domain. He said things about family dynamics being complicated right now. He said things about how he should have handled the communication differently and he was sorry if it came across a certain way. If it came across a certain way. Colton, I said, you texted me that immediate family only were invited. I am your sister. I have been your sister my entire life. There's not really an interpretation issue there. He was quiet. I would have gone to your wedding, I said. I would have gotten dressed up and driven or flown or whatever I needed to do, and I would have sat in whatever seat I was given, and I would have watched you get married and been genuinely happy for you because you're my brother. That's not complicated for me. I know, he said, and for the first time in the conversation, he sounded like himself. Not the managed version, just him. What changed? I asked. When you saw the post, what actually changed? He didn't answer right away. I didn't know you'd done something like that, he said finally. I didn't know you were. I didn't realize how well things had gone, I said. Yeah. So if things hadn't gone well, I said, if I'd sold that company for 100,000 instead of what I sold it for, would you still have sent that text? The silence after that was the most honest thing he said during the entire call. I want to be careful here about something because I think it's important. What I'm not saying is that I deserve respect because I have money. What I'm saying is that I deserved respect before the money, and the fact that the money was what prompted a second look is the whole problem. I was the same person on the day I sold that company that I was the year before, eating pasta in a too small apartment and believing in something nobody around me could see yet. I was the same person who got that text. What changed was Colton's information, not my worth. And I know that sounds like something you'd put on a cross-stitch, and I know the situation is more complicated than any clean statement can capture. But that's the thing I kept coming back to. Sitting on that pool deck with Grandma Ray and the sweet tea and the ocean doing whatever the ocean does when you're finally somewhere quiet enough to hear yourself think. I deserve to be at that wedding. Not because of $11 million, because I'm his sister. It's been 4 months since that weekend. Colton and I are talking cautiously. Brooke sent me a note, handwritten, which surprised me. That was, I think, as close to an apology as she could manage while still leaving herself room not to call it that. I haven't decided yet what I want from the relationship going forward. I'm giving it space. My parents have been different since the acquisition came out. More curious. Asking actual questions about what I built and how, which is something they never really did before. I'm trying to receive that generously. I'm finding it easier some days than others. Grandma Ray calls me every Sunday. She always calls me every Sunday, actually. That's not new. But the calls feel different now. Or maybe I'm just better at hearing what's always been in them. She ends every call the same way. You turned out all right, baby. I sold the Austin apartment and bought a house. It's not on an island. It's in a neighborhood with good coffee and a running path and a backyard that gets afternoon sun. I have plans for the backyard that have nothing to do with business and everything to do with learning. Finally, at 31, what I actually want the quiet parts of my life to look like. Tessa came over the first weekend I had the house, and we sat on the porch with takeout, and she said, "You know, the Kiawah thing was maybe the most extra thing you've ever done." Genuinely, yes, I said. Are you sorry? I thought about Grandma Ray in the entryway, looking around at the space. I thought about Mallory on the back deck with her phone taking pictures of the water. I thought about Cole asleep in the chair and Priya in the kitchen at 7 in the morning, already making something that smelled incredible. I thought about sitting on the pool deck with my phone full of missed calls and choosing, deliberately, to set it back down and look at the ocean instead. No, I said, not even a little. She nodded. We ate our food. The afternoon light came through the trees the way it does in June in Texas, warm and unhurried, like it has nowhere else to be. There are things I could have done differently. I know that. I could have told my family about the acquisition when it happened. I could have reached out to Colton directly instead of posting on Instagram and letting him find it. I could have had 12 of those conversations earlier, the ones where you stop performing smallness to make other people comfortable and just tell the truth about where you are. I could have in Tealkit. I'm not sure I was ready, and I'm not entirely sure they were ready to hear it. But I know this. The people who showed up for me when I had nothing to show were the same people sitting around that table on a Friday night on an island, eating good food and telling stories that went long into the evening. Nobody earned their seat. I just gave it to them. The rest of it is still being worked out. Family always is. I deleted the Instagram post about 2 months later, not because I regretted it, just because it had done the thing it needed to do, and keeping it felt like leaving the lights on after the party was over. I kept the photos from that weekend, though. There's one Tessa took without me knowing. I'm standing at the edge of the deck in the early morning before anyone else was awake, coffee in hand, looking out at the water. I don't look triumphant. I don't look like someone who just made a point. I just look like someone who finally got somewhere she was going. I've spent a lot of time thinking about cause and effect since that summer, not in the dramatic way. Just the quiet, unavoidable kind of thinking that happens when you finally have enough distance from something to see the whole shape of it. What Colton did wasn't new. That's the part people miss when they hear a story like this. They focus on the text, the one that said immediate family only, as if that was the inciting incident. It wasn't. It was just the moment the pattern became impossible to ignore. The pattern had been there for years. In the slow nod, in the patient waiting, in the way my choices were treated as things to be tolerated rather than respected. The text was just the pattern finally saying itself out loud. And here's what I've learned about that kind of pattern. It doesn't change because you get angry. It doesn't change because you make a scene or send the perfect response or win an argument at Thanksgiving. It changes, if it changes at all, when the information changes. When the person doing the underestimating is forced to reckon with a version of you that no longer fits the story they've been telling themselves. I didn't rent that house on Kiawah to make a point. I want to be honest about that. I did it because Grandma Ray deserved to be somewhere beautiful that weekend instead of sitting at home knowing she'd been handed a consolation seat at her own grandson's wedding. I did it because Tessa and Priya and Cole had shown up for me in every year that mattered, and I had the means now to give them something back. I did it because I was tired of making myself small to fit into spaces that were never going to expand to hold me anyway. The Instagram post, though, that one I did on purpose, and I don't regret it. There's a version of integrity that looks like staying quiet, like not making waves, like being the bigger person in the sense of absorbing things without responding. I spent most of my 20s trying to live that version. I thought it was dignity. I think now it's just a different kind of shrinking. Real integrity, the kind I've been trying to build since that summer, looks more like this: do the work, tell the truth, don't perform smallness to make other people comfortable. Don't wait for permission to take up space you've already earned. And when someone finally asks why you never said anything sooner, be honest with them about why, not to punish them, just because they deserve the real answer and so do you. Colton and I are still figuring out what we are to each other. That's slow work. It might always be slow, but what I notice now is that he asks questions he never asked before, real ones, about what I built and how, about what those years actually look like for me inside. That's not nothing. That's the beginning of something, even if I can't tell you yet what it becomes. Grandma Ray still calls every Sunday. She has called every Sunday my entire adult life. What changed is that I finally stopped treating those calls like a small thing. She saw me before there was anything obvious to see. That's rarer than any acquisition, any number, any house on any island. I try to remember that. What I know now that I didn't fully know then, the life you build in the quiet years, when nobody is watching and nobody is impressed and you're just doing the work because you believe in it. That life is the real thing. Everything that came after was just the world catching up.